shaboom. Yada da 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 da. Listening to See Here, See Here. Okay, I won't do that again. My name is Maurice. You're listening to episode 125 of the See Here podcast. We're proudly part of the Pantheon network of music discussion podcasts. On the other end of a Zoom connection, not a shaboom connection, but a Zoom connection, is my partner in Brantford, Ontario, Mr. Tim Merrett.
Greetings.
I'm sad to say that our other regular co-host, Kerry Fristow, is once again not available. Kerry, we love you. Hope that you're feeling better.
Get well soon, Kay.
We want you back on the show next month. But who we do have, I'm very thrilled to welcome back to the show, is the host, now sadly ex-program from PBS FM here in Melbourne, but he ran it for 30 years, just finished it a couple of weeks ago, the wonderful Mr. Doo-Wop, aka Peter Merrett. Welcome to See Here, Peter.
Thank you for the very, very generous welcome, Maurice and Tim. It's an absolute pleasure to be back with you again, and I'm excited about this show.
We just had a conversation with a legend in the doo-wop scene. He was a member of Jay and the Americans. He did a lot of music direction for 70s musical films like
The Warriors.
And American Hot Wax. He had involvement with a film that we've discussed before on the show,
Streets of Fire.
And he's just gone and made a film of his own, first time directing. I'm talking about Kenny Vance. He's made a wonderful documentary called Heart and Soul, a love story. And I first found out about this film through listening to your program, Peter, The Malt Shop Hop. I'm so glad I happened to catch the show that day. But before we get into speaking with Kenny after the break, I just want to get a little bit of a fill in on what is happening now that sadly the Malt Shop Hop is no longer at PBS FM here in Melbourne. What's happening?
I presented that show for 36 3/4 years. When I started, people didn't want it because, as Kenny will mention, and we did during the interview, is that people didn't know the music. It wasn't played here on Australian radio. And Tim wouldn't know about our White Australia policy or things like that. So there was only a few token black songs played like the Platters or Drifters, etc., etc. And hence we had one disc jockey in Melbourne named Stan Roth who would play it.
Mm-hmm.
He'd get sacked, taken off air. And he used to get the cabin crew of Qantas planes to buy the latest records in the States and bring them back. Later years, I got to know Stan very, very much because he said I was lucky I could play all that music and not get into trouble. And we became very good friends till his passing. But I was gifted a chance to do radio. I promised my grandmother, I come from a black heritage, my mother's family, African-American. So I'd been collecting since 1957 and I had a huge collection and still do. But I needed the place to play it and I promised her I would. And I got onto radio and I fought and fought. People said, oh, no, you can't play that. It won't last 6 weeks, let alone 6 months. That was 36 years ago. So time doesn't stand still and time has passed me by at PBS and I'll be forever grateful for what they gifted me. But I'm now moving into internet radio as I've been invited by numerous American stations, but I've chosen one. It's a case of watch this space and I'll be doing a new era of the show, but it will they want me to do the same show. They don't want to change because they don't do a doo-wop show like I do.
I look forward to finding out the details when that's set in concrete, and I will be posting the details in both the Love That Album and See Here podcast groups because people need to hear this. I would have liked it if PBS had archived all those old programs and made those available. But anyway, as you say, entering a new era. I just wanted to ask you something, I mean, not really related to the radio show, but I presume that you were great friends with Dennis Williams here in Melbourne?
Dennis and I grew up together in Preston.
Oh, magnificent.
And in fact, his very first business he owned with his wife was a sandwich bar in Albert Street, Preston, near Chifley Drive. And Dennis is very famous. I'll give you, I shouldn't do it, but anyway, I will. Dennis won't mind. Dennis has a propensity for perspiring heavily. So he was working one day making sandwiches and some perspiration dripped into a sandwich. And the chap buying it said, I want the sandwich, but can you take the perspiration off it? And it was when Dennis decided, I want to go, and Pauline's agreed with him because they were heavily into the rock and roll. And I think they were the first presidents of the Chuck Berry fan club. and they were into music. So they started Hound Dog's Bop Shop, and that's where it came from.
So I should tell to listeners out there and to Tim that Hound Dog's Bop Shop was a legendary record store
Institution.
here in Melbourne. I just did, for Love That Album, a 2-part series on people's recollections of record stores. And I didn't do my own segment, which I should have been talking about Hound Dog's Bop Shop, but that was, actually, now that I think of it, I did mention it because it was the one shop that you could go to, well, one of 2 shops in Melbourne that you could go to where the guy behind the counter, Mr. Dennis Williams, would say, "Here, have a beer." And
of course.
And you'd be standing around and talking about music, and people be talking about obscure B-sides. And it wasn't just rock and roll or doo-wop. He knew everything about pre-war blues and surf music and stuff like that.
Maurice, do you remember his famous saying, "How can you sleep at night without this record?"
I don't think I ever heard him say that to me, no.
Yeah, he would say that. The shop spawned a lot of our great blues outfits in Melbourne.
The Paramount Trio.
Trio came out of there, but he was famous for Tim outside the shop under the awning on a main street. He would have a live act on the Saturday morning. The trams would stop so that people could dance. And they went on for years and years and years. And you were either a Thursday nighter, a Friday nighter, or a Saturday, because it was only open those 3 days. And I was a Thursday nighter. But he would do hundreds of mail-outs leading up to those.
Wow.
And it was, as part of my life, I so sadly miss the regular get-together. Same guys. They were all music nuts, absolute nuts and fanatics. If you didn't know something about something, somebody did, and they would fill you in.
Wonderful. As you say, great institution, but I only bring that up because there was so much rock and roll and so much doo-wop available in his shop. An incredible place. So I thought, yeah, you must have had a connection down there. We're here predominantly to talk about Kenny Vance and his film Heart and Soul, A Love Story. And it really is. I don't think we mentioned this so much in the interview, but the format of this documentary is it's not so much a chronological, here's a history, this happened, and this happened, but because Kenny was in the eye of the hurricane, as it were, it's more like a memoir, his memories and the people who he performed with, their memories. And it's just such a beautiful film.
Strolling down memory lane.
Amazing.
What we're going to do now is I'll play you the trailer and then we'll present you the discussion that we had with Kenny. And I think before we started recording this intro, I think basically Tim and I agreed that this was possibly, if not the best, and certainly one of the very best interviews that we've ever had with a film director. This was absolutely amazing. Kenny was so giving. Whether or not you're a fan of doo-wop music, you will find something to love about this discussion, and you will be converted by the end. So
and Kenny can still sing.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, he can.
Don't spoil it, but that's classic.
Sorry about that. Zip, zip.
We'll be back after you hear the trailer, and then we'll be back to tell you what's happening in episode 126 of See Here at the end of our discussion with Kenny Vance.
You know, in those days, the way groups started, none of us really knew any music. So if you were lucky enough to have 3 guys hit 3 different notes, the next day we bought suits and took pictures.
And here it is, Alan Freed's Rock and Roll Party.
I remember hearing Alan Freed on the radio. He was having a rock and roll show. No one knew what that was. I took the subway to the Brooklyn Paramount. It was the most unbelievable thing I'd ever seen in my life. Everybody could sing their ass off.
When you heard all of those harmonies interchanging, it was beautiful.
I had never seen choreography like that in my life.
I love to look out in the audience. You could feel it, people enjoying themselves.
The major record companies all of a sudden had to take notice and say, what are these guys doing?
Once the note comes down and you can feel the vibration of the harmony, there's nothing like it.
My father trained us to sing gospel. When we got out in the street, that's when we sang doo-wop.
Baby, baby, how I want you.
George Goldner, he was a cat who made records, signed groups, owned the record company.
How would you like to look at a gold record with your name on it and not get paid for it?
When it's sold, someone says, well, how much did you make? And we go, well, we didn't really make anything.
They stopped promoting us. I still get a little, when I talk about it.
Next thing I know, it ain't what it was. So now I hit the bottom. Wham!
It's rock and roll.
It is now.
And when that light comes on, like you hear that music, that's it. No matter how bad you feel, it's showtime.
You guys have been together since you're teenagers.
Right.
And to still be together and to have made it through, it's a miracle. We've carried these songs with us through the years. They live inside of us.
I just enjoyed it so much that I did it for 42 years.
This is where it all started. It's the music of the unsung heroes of rock and roll.
You're the girl in my heart. And when I told her I didn't love her anymore, she cried.
And welcome back to episode 125 of See Here podcast. Tim and I are very, very excited to have a special guest co-presenter to talk with us with our very special director guest this time around. Our special guest co-presenter is the host of the Malt Shop Hop, Mr. Peter Merrett. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you, Maurice. Pleasure to be here.
And welcoming as a first-time guest on the program is a musician and director of an incredible documentary about his own memories of doo-wop music, both as a participant and watching his fellow performers. I'm talking about the great Kenny Vance, he of Jay and the Americans, and his new documentary is called Heart and Soul, A Love Story. Thank you for being on See Here, Kenny.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Congratulations on the release of Heart and Soul. I presume that this film was a long time in the making, because we get some of the people who you speak to in the film, and we'll focus on some of those as we go throughout the discussion. But there's references to, it was 40 years ago that we did this. So I'm thinking, okay, it's more than 40 years since the original era of doo-wop music. So how long had this film been in the planning and in the making, and what happened that it took till 2025 to eventually see its release?
When I left Jay and the Americans in 72 or something like that, I didn't really know what to do, because I had been doing it since I was a teenager. And I was maybe 30 years old. The one thing that I did learn was I learned how to make records. And so luckily, I got signed to Atlantic Records by Joel Dorn, who was a producer of Roberta Flack, Killing Me Softly, and The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. And he produced Bette Midler and Peter Allen and Rahsaan Roland Kirk and Yusef Lateef and Les McCann and Fathead Newman, and just a tremendous array of people. And he knew that I was like so into this type of music that he wanted to make a record with me. And so he signed me to Atlantic, and we made one of the tracks on the album that we made was Looking for an Echo.
At Erasmus Hall High School, we used to harmonize. Me and Benny and Ara and two Italian guys. We were singing oldies, but they were newies then. And today when I play my old 45s, I remember when.
It didn't become a hit at the time, but some people in California had heard it, and they were getting ready to do a movie called American Hot Wax, which was, Peter, I don't know if you know it, it's the Alan Freed story. Have you ever seen it?
Oh, most definitely.
I became the music director of that movie, and I also started the Planetones in that movie with Bruce Sedano, Eddie Hokinson, and Joe Esposito, who were a group called the Brooklyn Dreams. And then I was lucky, and I wound up doing Animal House after that, and I produced John Belushi singing Louie Louie, and did The Warriors, which was a gang movie at the time.
Yep.
A favorite film of ours, yeah.
Walter Hill, yeah.
Walter Hill, and I did Hairspray. Then I was the music director on Saturday Night Live. And then I did Eddie and the Cruisers with John Cafferty.
Oh, yeah. Beaver Brown Band.
Beaver Brown Band. We were blessed with that because the album became a top 5 album in 1985 when that music was not the talk of the town, and because HBO had shown it. So I wound up in the film business, and then Eddie and the Cruisers was in the middle of the 80s, and then I don't know, I kind of got disenchanted with it, and I thought, look, I'm getting older, and I got into this business singing doo-wop in the subways. If you're blessed and you're lucky enough to get a chance to do what you want in this life, I just thought, maybe I should start a group. And I restarted the Planetones in 1992. And we started to go on the circuit. I didn't even know there was a circuit, but there was an oldies circuit. And people like Speedo and the Cadillacs, and Herb Cox and the Cleftones, and Jimmy Beaumont and the Skyliners, and Arlene Smith and the Chantels, and Laverne Baker, and Bobby Freeman. All of these people were there, and they all could still sing, and they all had the costumes. They all could dance. It was the early 90s. I would be on the show, and they would play at places like Madison Square Garden in Manhattan in front of 20,000 people. Because I had been in the film business, I thought, it would be interesting to start to interview some of these people and talk to them. And so that was the beginning of the idea. I had a lot of footage over the years, and then in 2000, collecting it for years. And then what happened, I was living in south of Brooklyn, south of Coney Island, is a peninsula called Rockaway. And I lived on the peninsula there, right on the ocean. And in 2012, there was a hurricane. And I had lived there for 40 years. But this hurricane was different from all others because it took my house.
Oh, my Lord.
Out into the ocean. And I was performing Time Life runs these malt shop memories cruises, I think they're called, or doo-wop cruises. And I was on a cruise with Dion and Frankie Avalon and people like that. I'm in my cabin and I'm watching the Weather Channel, and I see that the storm took a circuitous route. And I thought, oh no, I'm screwed now. And sure enough, the next day I called a friend of mine who lived up the street, and I said, what's the deal? I said, go down and check my house out. Because after 40 years, I had survived many hurricanes and nothing really ever happened. So he went down the street and he says, your house is gone. So needless to say, a few days later, I wound up, the cruise was over and I came back and the house was gone. But on top of what was the kitchen was my office room. And there were no walls and there was no ceiling, but the floor was there and the couch was there and some drawers were there and the guitar was there. I got a ladder and I went up there. And miraculously, a lot of the footage that you see in Heart and Soul was preserved in these plastic bins. I was living in a FEMA hotel in Staten Island for about 4 months. And I brought what I could find, which was very minimal stuff. A few photographs, maybe a broken 45, things like that. But I thought, I could either become broken from this, or I could, the fact that the footage from the movie was still intact, or some of it, I thought this is a sign that I have to do this. And so I started on a journey. And then I guess by 20, it's hard to believe what year it is, actually, but let me think. So it's 25, maybe 7 years ago, I got serious about it. And I contacted a very famous independent documentary law firm in Los Angeles. I said, I want to sell shares in this proposed movie idea. So they prepared the papers and everything cost a lot of money. Then I started to go and speak to people that people said, oh, well, speak to this lawyer or speak to this dentist, or people who, had money. And I started to go and meet people, and they, were so happy to talk to me, and we spent a lot of time together, and it was interesting and everything. But when it came down to it, they wouldn't come up with any money. And it was the worst thing I ever did because I hated doing it. I hated asking for money. It just was not my thing. Then as fate would have it, I went to visit a friend. I'm in Florida now, and I'm in Boynton Beach, but I went to Palm Beach and I was visiting a friend, and he was on the phone with a guy, and he said, and the guy said, "Oh, could I speak to Kenny?" And I got on the phone with him. They're doing honoring me at a dinner in Manhattan. He says, "Would you come and sing a few songs?" So I said, "Sure." He says, "How much do you want?" And I said, "No, I don't want anything. I'll just come up and do it." So I went up, and there were about 1,000 people in this banquet hall, and there were people talking about him, about his philanthropy. And I wound up, someone says, "Okay, Kenny Vance is going to sing." And I get up with the guitar and I start singing In the Still of the Night by the Five Satins. And I start singing Diamonds and Pearls by the Paradons. And the 1,000 people just keep talking. It's like I was wallpaper up there. But I look out in the audience and there's one guy looking at me, this guy, David Burley, and he was looking at me. He's the guy that I came up to do it for. So the next day, he calls me up and he says, "You want to have lunch with me?" And I said, "Sure, And he says, "Meet me at the Friars Club." The Friars Club was a big show business haunt in those days, I don't think it's there anymore. And Milton Berle was there. People, like Bob Hope, Jack Benny, and Bing Crosby. And so I went there and he said, we started talking and he says, "You know that thing you're doing?" I said, You mean the documentary?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "How many investors do you have?" I said, "None." He says, "I'll do it."
Wow.
So Peter knows to use these songs. There are 55 songs in Heart and Soul. So most of those songs were written independently by people like Harvey Fuqua. Little Anthony wrote one of the songs. They were all published independently in the 50s. But as the years have gone by, Sony Music, Universal Music, BMG, all of the big publishers own all of these songs. And they basically want a fortune to use them. Fate again intervened and Paul Simon helped me out. He wrote one of the songs, Loves Me Like a Rock, which we have it by the Dixie Hummingbirds. It wound up where they kind of agreed to make me pay a lesser fee than it would normally take. Then, for example, like Come Go With Me by the Del Vikings. Dum, 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 be-doo, dum, dum, dum. They wanted $40,000 to use it in the film. And I thought to myself, the guys who wrote the song are the Del Vikings. They never made 40 cents.
Cripps Johnson made nothing from that song.
Never made a penny.
Never give me a chance. Come into my heart. No, darling, we will never part. I need you, darling, so come go with me. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So fate intervened, and we were able to complete the movie, and now I'm here talking to you guys about the movie.
Congratulations.
Peter was lucky enough to see it 15 times.
And I'll see it another 15 times.
I just want to come back to a thing that you mentioned before, and I'll sort of open the floor after that. But you mentioned very early on about the song Looking for an Echo. And Peter will know this, that song was something very important here in Australia, because in 1975, we had a band here, you probably know about this, a band called Old 55, which were, I don't know, I guess if you want to say, would you reckon Australia's version of Sha Na Na?
No. Yes, definitely.
They had an album out called Take It Greasy, and I think possibly in the wake of American Graffiti being so popular, this band came together to do a lot of original songs and a lot of covers in that 1950s rock and roll and doo-wop style. But Looking for an Echo was their big hit single. And at the time, I just thought it was a song that they'd gone and written. And then later on, I find out, no, it's a cover. Then finding out through recent reading up about you was that this was your song. I mean, it was written for you by, what's his name? Richard Reicheg. Have I got that right? But the difference is between Old 55, they're doing it as a retro thing, and they did a very good job. But this was your story. You'd lived this. Tell us about your memories about recording, and were you driven to tears when you first heard the song presented to you? Tell us about that song.
Richie has passed on, but Richie was a good friend of mine, and he lived in Brooklyn, where I lived, and he lived on Montague Street, if you're familiar with that neighborhood. And I used to go over to his house, and when I was in J&E Americans, we would write songs together that J&E Americans would record. And then I guess in the early 74, maybe, I was over there. He had just started the song. And, we went to Erasmus High School. I could play it on the guitar if you want. I mean, whatever.
Please, go for it. Please.
At Erasmus High School, we used to harmonize. Me and Benny and Ira and two Italian guys. We were singing oldies, but they were goodies then. And today when I play my old 45s, I remember when.
Voice is sounding beautiful, Kenny.
Magic, man.
Magic. So, can I ask you a question in regards to Looking for an Echo?
Sure.
I remember back in 2000, Martin Davison released a movie based around that song, Looking for an Echo, with Armand Asante as the lead actor. Do you remember that?
Well, of course I remember it, because Armand Asante was lip-syncing my voice.
Yes, exactly. Exactly right. And I think it reintroduced the song to people. And I wonder how much of your childhood appeared somewhere in that movie.
Just generally speaking, not really. There are so many specific things that took place in Brooklyn. And also, it's too much. The minutia of it all is just too much to talk about, I guess, at this time. But it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And also, it's a tremendous movie. A really tremendous movie. None of these movies or even Looking for an Echo, never really. It was a different time. It was a time when Star Wars was out. And, here's a little, $1 million movie about, talking about a $75 million movie as opposed to $800,000 movie where it's about a guy who's a bartender who used to be in a doo-wop group. So it didn't really have that much appeal to mainstream people.
It is such a good movie, and I recommend Maurice and Tim find it and have a look at it. It is a great backstory in it, and it sort of mirrors what was happening to a lot of the groups who disbanded, and then, as Kenny was talking about the tours, could get back together again. And the group in the movie get back together again.
Peter, and gentlemen, the last night of the movie is the last scene in the movie. I was up all night while they were filming it, because it took all night for them to get it. And it was so powerful because it sort of reminisced when Dion and the Belmonts, who were the group that we were all crazy about. When you listen to I Wonder Why by Dion and the Belmonts, I think it was the opening movie of A Bronx Tale. It's just, it's at the height of the greatest doo-wop record ever made.
No, I love you like I do. No, I do. Don't know why I love you. Don't know why I care. I just want your love to share. I wonder why.
So Dion and the Belmonts has this very special place in my heart and in the hearts of everyone who's still around that appreciates not only this music, but this whole world of people. At the end of the movie, this group broke up because the lead singer, Vinny, didn't want to do it anymore, or whatever his reason was. And it reminded me of Dion when he left the group. And the guys that were remained in the Belmonts were destroyed by it. And this movie, Peter, if you recall that last scene, is just echoes exactly what I envisioned if those guys ever got back together again, just for a meeting and just for to be in the same room together. It's a very powerful last scene of the movie. Looking for an Echo with Armand Assante.
Wow. It's not even close, but I was going to say that it's almost kind of when you talked about Eddie and the Cruisers with John Cafferty, and they did a sequel to it where they come back.
Yes, I worked on that with John. Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Eddie and the Cruisers too.
I feel kind of silly for saying this after hearing how much of a pain in the ass you went through to have this whole production made. But after watching the film, to me, it almost feels like it could have been a whole series like Scorsese did with the Blues. I could have
100%.
seen an episode on every single person or some of the major acts. Like, it just seemed like you compressed so much into what you did, and it's incredible.
I hear what you're saying. I had to cut out the most incredible scene with Raul Cedar, who was the Harp Tones. He was the musical director of the Harp Tones. He wrote Life is But a Dream.
I love you with all my heart, adore you and all your charms. I want you to do your part.
That's the way it goes. He wrote most of the songs. Let's put it that way. Willie Winfield with the amazing falsetto. But I went up to Harlem one time and I went up to Raul Cedar's apartment and we were singing, I think maybe That's the Way It Goes or Life is But a Dream. And I said to him, Raul, you wrote a standard. Life is But a Dream. This incredible standard. It's been recorded by so many people. I said, where did you get the inspiration for it? And he says, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream. Life is but a dream. It's what you make it. Always try to give. Don't ever take it. So he got it from the end of that song. And it's just
That's incredible.
And then I have a scene with Charlie Thomas, which we have a website, which you might know about, but it's called heartandsoulthemovie.com. It's all one word. It's all spelled out. Heart and A-N-D, soul, the, T-H-E, movie.com. And some of these clips that never made it to the final cut are on that website. There's a clip with Charlie Thomas in there. I also interviewed Herb Cox and from the Cleftones. He's got stories about when Frankie Lyman came up to George Goldner's office and just other things. And this is really, am I being too long-winded here?
No, not at all, man. Not at all.
The longer, the better.
He tells me a story that in those days in America, but mostly in urban cities like New York, Newark, Hartford, Connecticut, Chicago, LA, and Houston, Texas, and New Orleans. But here's the story about New York. So in New York, there was two stations, WWRL and WNJR. They were rhythm and blues stations. I guess in those days they call it race records. They were Black adult recording artists making records for Black adults. And so if a record was a hit, it would sell 40,000 copies. People like Big Joe Turner, Nappy Brown, Faye Adams, the Dominoes. And so Herb Cox is 13 and they're listening to these records and they figure, well, okay, we want to do it too. And so they wrote songs that they thought were parroting the records that they heard on the radio. But in reality, what they were doing is they were writing adolescent versions of those songs. Like, little, yeah, little, yeah. You'd have never heard that on those records, on the adult records. So when they went up to Rama Records, which was George Goldner's first company, they would sing these songs. So George Goldner, he had the ears and he says, okay, let's record these records. But there was no such thing as a rock and roll musician. There were no guys playing the guitars. There were no guitar solos on those records. They're all jazz bebop solos. All of the records. So what happened was there was a jazz club across the street on Broadway called Birdland. And these guys who were born in 1907 were in Birdland in the 50s, and they were playing bebop jazz. So they got them to come to play on these sessions. And when you listen to like Why Do Fools Fall in Love by Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, you hear these adult musicians. You hear the sax solo is by Jimmy Wright, and he was the arranger. Those records that exist in my movie were played. The whole organic, beautiful scene only lasted 5 years when all of those records were made. I often say, like, if I'm doing a Q&A at of a screening, I said to people, I said, you know, if this music was crap, there'd be no movie. But the records are spectacular.
Yeah.
Because they're played by adults, guys who came in with the Jay McShann band or came in with bands, big bands from the Midwest to play in New York. People like Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Thelonious Monk, and not them per se, but that level of guy. They're playing on these records. And if the Beatles would have played on those records, they wouldn't have been any good, because it was those two worlds like came together and created this incredible hybrid. So now when these records sold, they sold 1 million copies. Frankie Lyman's record was an international hit.
Why do birds sing so gay? In love with my weather break of day. Why do they fall in love? Why does the rain fall from up above? Why do fools fall in love? Why do they fall in love?
All of a sudden, like ad agencies and cosmetic companies and clothing companies and movie companies go, who bought this record? So it was bought by a teenage demographic. And those companies have been pandering to that group of people to this day. They're not making movies for us. They're making movies for kids. That scene, in my mind, in the music business at that time, started that revolution, that teenage revolution where they became the people that adults want to sell stuff to.
Kenny, do you find some of it had happened then was being in the right place at the right time? Because Frankie was never supposed to be the lead singer of the Teenagers. I think it was Herman Santiago had a cold. So Goldman said, who can sing a lead? Frank said, I can. And the rest became history because Herman had to stand back with Jimmy Merchant, etc. And Frankie became an international star.
It's 100% true because Herb Koch was there when that happened, because Herb Koch actually had, with the Cleftones, had the first hit record, I guess on G Records.
G Records it was, yeah.
Because there was a group on Rama called The Crows that had G. And then he named, G was the song, oh, G, my oh, G. And then what happened was that George named the next label G Records.
Love that girl. Oh, 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 G, my oh, G. Well, oh, oh, G. Oh, I love that girl. Love that oh, 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 oh.
And then the Cleftones were on G. And then Frankie Lyman was the next group on G. But he eclipsed Herb Koch because he was 13 and he was just a cool little kid that was, unbelievable. And that record, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, was probably one of the greatest records of that genre ever made.
So coming back to the point you were making before, Kenny, about the musicians who were performing, so a lot of them were jazz cats who were playing in Birdland and a lot of these other clubs. And I mean, I was actually going to sort of ask you something about whether the musicians on a lot of those records were permanent roster of musicians. Like going into the 60s, we've all heard the stories about the Wrecking Crew and the Nashville Cats for the doo-wop records that were being recorded in that 5-year span in New York. Was it all the same jazz cats who were on all these sessions for G and Rama and those labels?
Exactly. As a matter of fact, if you look up on Wikipedia or something, you look up Jimmy Wright, Wright. I think there's a little bit of a story about him saying that he was the equivalent to Scotty Moore, with Elvis. He was the equivalent to whoever was a great recognized person in that day, but he was like the main unsung hero of all of this particular great music.
But he was a giant amongst all those players. And it was interesting that some of the labels then were formed by musicians like Al Porter at Combo Records, and he was a horn player himself.
Yeah. In those days, like RCA and the big labels didn't want to have anything to do with this music. This was like porno music or something.
Right.
It was like...
It was unsophisticated kids' music.
Right.
And so people realized that for a couple of $100, you could get one of these groups off of the street, and for $300, you could make a record that could conceivably sell 1 million copies. All of these fly-by-night labels like Herald, who had the Mellow Kings and the Turbans, and then Old Town, who had the Solitaires. And so all of a sudden, all of the Winley label, whose brother was in the Clovers, Paul Winley, they had the Paragons and the Jesters, and Apollo Records, who had the original Little Anthony and the Imperials. They were known as the Chesters. And they did a record called The Fires Burn No More. If you check it out, you hear Little Anthony, and it's a killer. The guy's probably 16 years old. And it's one of the greatest performances of this type of music that you could ever hear.
As I understand, Kenny, you've said that a lot of the musicians started their own labels.
I didn't say that. Peter
I misunderstood. Oh, sorry.
I said that.
Okay, so would either of you be able to sort of suggest whether that was a way how those musicians were able to make a living, given that management and publishing, which seemed to be like for many, many years a way to screw the artist over. But was that how the artists made their living, was through running a label and selling those records? Was that how they did it?
I think for a few who did, but it was the people who went into the music business. A lot of them were just businessmen. You look at the Chess Brothers and Ahmet Ertegun at Atlantic Records. If he didn't have Jesse Stone, would he have had all the great hits with Ruth Brown, the Drifters, and other artists?
That's right. Jesse Stone was his secret weapon, as was Richard Barrett for George Goldner, as was Muddy Waters, and the guy who was the bass man,
Willie Dixon
for Chess Records. So they all had somebody that was their guy. It's a tremendous time, and like I think one thing. My film, we just got it into the Smithsonian Institute, which is really
congratulations.
That's amazing.
Congratulations.
Amazing. It seems to me like people like Netflix and all, they're not interested in it. But the academic people are interested in it because nobody really ever shined a light on it like this. Peter, and just to know that I have all of this footage of all these other people, that they're really, like you were saying at the beginning, there could be a trilogy. It could be like the thing that Scorsese did for PBS.
Right.
It could be that, but I could see that the mainstream people, it's sort of like all this. I made about a dozen CDs and I never could get a real label. Because it's not that it's not successful, because it is successful. There's a world of people that gravitate to it. But, the mainstream people are just, they're like unconscious to it.
Right. What I think it is that they don't know how to connect the dots, and they're just looking at right now. And I was going to say that, like, one of my favorite bands of all time is Parliament Funkadelic, George Clinton. And you go back and you look at the beginning when they had the Parliaments. And, and that's what I'm talking about is that, you go back to all of this at base level in the era that, you were in, and you can connect the dots and say, well, if it wasn't for, Frankie Lyman, if it wasn't for all of this, you wouldn't have A, B, C, or D that you are listening to today.
Absolutely.
And that's it. And I want to get in a quick thing, too, that really, I'm generally not a nationalistic guy, but I was really proud, and I'm glad that you got in a little piece there in the film with Paul Anka, because I'm Canadian. So I was happy about that. I was just like, "You're right on. You Canada represent." Yeah.
Yeah, he was on the tour with Eugene Pitt from the Jive 5.
And the closest like I've ever had personally to anything that you might have experienced every other night was that I lived in Seoul, Korea, and I had an opportunity to see Solomon Burke. And that was at the end of his run. And he sat in a chair, but King Solomon, man, I never expected to break down and cry. I mean, I did. And I'm not a guy to weep, but it was just incredible. The voice, he still had that voice, you know?
Yeah.
And just to think, to be in this time back then and to have this cavalcade of not just seeing one person, like now you're paying $200 to see one artist, but back then to see this artist and this artist and this artist and this artist all in one night. It's just like, you know,
you could go to the Brooklyn Paramount, you know, for $1.75 and see Chuck Berry, Little Richard, the Lee Andrews and the Hearts, the Chantels, Buddy Holly.
And this is going to sound silly, but one of the things that really, the first time I heard some doo-wop was that they used to have these compilation albums of kind of novelty songs and goofy greats or whatever. And they were like these songs that were 45 singles that were just these novelty songs. And I remember hearing Charlie Brown with the Coasters.
I smell smoke in the auditorium. Charlie Brown, he's a clown. That Charlie Brown, he's gonna get caught. Just you wait and see.
Why is everybody always picking on me?
That's him on his knees.
And hearing that for the first time and going, wow, like, and just playing this over and over and over and over. And I mean, technically they weren't doo-wop, but there's that song that the Blues Brothers do, Rubber Biscuit. That, to me, I'm going, okay, I know what this is. And it was just funny how Aykroyd was able to just pull that off, you know? So I just thought, like, that's amazing, man. Like, going back.
Did you ever hear of a wish sandwich? Well, it's the kind of a sandwich that you're supposed to take 2 pieces of bread and wish you had some meat.
Well, you mentioned 2 things that I know Peter would like this. That in the Chips was Sammy Strain, who's in the movie. He's one of the Imperials.
Correct. Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to mention that as an aside.
Kenny, the basis of the music, though, was traditionally formed on low harmonies and nonsensible syllables, and that became the hallmark for the groups.
As Tim was saying, you know, the Coasters were written by these 2 geniuses. Not only did they write the Yakety Yak, Charlie Brown, Searchin', Love Potion Number 9, Smokey Joe's Cafe, Jerry Lieber as a lyricist. When you think of, like, I took my troubles down to Madame Ruth. You know, the gypsy with the gold-capped tooth? She had a shop down on 34th and Vine selling little bottles of Love Potion number 9. I mean, come on. He was unbelievable. Those Coasters records were social commentaries of the time, and he was just brilliant. We were blessed. Fate again intervenes, and we wind up in Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller's office in 1961 with Jay Trainer, Howie, and Sandy and myself, and we sing a cappella for them. We sing a cappella for them, Wisdom of a Fool by the 5 Keys.
If you're lucky enough to have someone who loves you, then be glad that you've got someone who loves you. 'Cause the lips that were warm can grow cool. Listen to the wisdom of a fool.
Rudy West was the lead singer of the 5 Keys.
Nicky Smith and Maryland Pierce for the leads.
Okay. That's a deep dive, man. That's really good.
Can I ask you, when you did get approached by Lever and Stoller, you were the Harbourlights. How did they convince you to change your name?
Oh no, we were not the Harbourlights. We were the Harbourlights. Sandy and I and a girl by the name of Sidel Sherman. But what happened was we wound up going into, on Broadway, there was the Brill Building, which was 1619 Broadway on 49th and Broadway. And then about 3 blocks up at the Ed Sullivan Theater where David Letterman did his show was 1697 Broadway, which housed Old Town Records and Hull Records and a bunch of like fly-by-night record companies, Ivy Records, but they also had a manager by the name of Jim Gribble. And he managed the Mellow Kings, the Passions, the Mystics who did Hushabye, and Paul Simon was up there as a writer, and Al Cooper was up there as a writer. The Harbor Lights were up there, but Jay Traynor, the original lead singer of Jay and the Americans, was in the Mystics at that time. He didn't sing Hushabye, but he's the lead singer on Blue Star, which was like their 4th single. And we kind of got together and we were kind of disenchanted with where we were at, even though we were 17 years old. And we decided to start a new group. We didn't have a name, but a friend of ours knew Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, and they got us an audition there. And Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller gave us the name Jay and the Americans. They originally want to call us Binky Jones and the Americans, but we freaked. And Jay Traynor, John Traynor, he says, my nickname is Jay. So they said, okay, Jay and the Americans.
History would have been very different.
Now, one interesting thing I wanted to mention in the film was that you're talking about how groups would have sing-offs, almost like competitions, right?
Yeah.
And it really sparked something in my head because there was a documentary that came out, I think, in the 80s, and it was called 12 Blocks from, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was all about the gangs in New York in the 70s and the 80s, the Latin Kings and all these gangs, and how they all basically, and it's almost like the beginning of the Warriors, but they all came together through dance. They would have dance-offs, and it was the way that they actually got the gangs to settle their beef. Was through these dance-offs. And so what I was thinking about was that going back to what you were showing in the film about how these, and I'm not saying that people were getting violent, like, back in the day, the guys had any beef, but I was just saying that you could see how it extended from all like the singing competitions and the contests to see who was the cock of the walk to eventually, where it got really serious and got violent, but it still got settled with expression and art.
That's amazing. When you think about how sweet that is, it's so incongruous to being in a gang. We're going to have a dance-off. Now we'll put the knives away and brass knuckles, and now we're going to have a dance-off. I never did hear of that, but that's wild.
But it's an extension of what you were talking about in your film, about the whole idea about the expression of art and about basically, there's nothing, competition basically fuels creativity. The idea that the guys would go out there and everybody would say, well, hey, man, I'm up now. You had your piece. You guys step off and let us come on and sit under the stoop and do our thing now, so.
Kenny, wasn't it a way to get the girls as well with the sing-off?
Oh, yeah.
No, I wouldn't know.
The group that sang the best, all the girls would gravitate to it.
I'll lead that into another question about the development of where we went from doo-wop in the 50s to, I guess it was doo-wop was still R&B in its way, but the Motown sound was very different. And yet all these groups like the Four Tops and the Marvelettes and the Supremes and the Temptations, they were still doing the dance moves and they were still doing the vocal harmonies and stuff like that, but it was very different to how doo-wop started. I mean, were you thrilled with how those records and those groups evolved from doo-wop into
those
the Motown
groups,
sound?
When we were with Jay and the Americans, I was actually, we played at the Brooklyn Paramount, the Brooklyn Fox with Murray the K was the disc jockey. And so we played with Marvin Gaye, we played with the Temptations, we played with Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, we played with the Four Tops, we played with Martha and the Vandellas, we played with the Supremes, and we were all a big family, but they told us that there was a theater in Detroit that when they were kids, they would go to see Speedo and the Cadillacs. And that's where they saw that dancing. Because, God, I can't remember the choreographer. Maybe you guys know the name.
Charlie Atkins?
Charlie Atkins. I believe he was one of the Nicholas brothers.
Correct.
No, he was with Atkins and Cole. Atkins and Cole, but the Nicholas brothers in the old movies, if you look up the Nicholas brothers online, you see these two guys dancing that'll absolutely blow your mind. Blow your mind. And also, aside from those groups, Philadelphia had its scene with Tom Bell. And they had the Spinners, they had the Stylistics, they had the Delphonics.
Delphonics. I love the Delphonics.
Oh my God.
Absolutely.
Didn't I blow your mind this time?
Yes, great
We
song.
had those records.
Did not blow your mind this time, didn't I? Did not blow your mind this time, didn't I?
Listen, I thought that heart of yours was true, girl. Now didn't I think it, baby?
You could wrap your soul around those records. Those records were killers. And of course, the Motown thing. But those guys also, Berry Gordy used the older jazz musicians or blues musicians that were playing in these clubs, for no money. And they became the Motown band.
The Funk Brothers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I believe there was a movie of documentary that was really great.
Standing in the Shadow of Motown.
Standing in the Shadow of Motown. Thank you. So yes, that music grew out of the music that I grew up with and the music that I made the film about.
Now, I know that they're kind of a revisionist group, but it always was funny to me how you look at Woodstock with Sha Na Na, and there's so many people that are just like, what are these guys doing here? Like these guys stand out like a fart in church, man. Like they don't belong here, but they do belong there, absolutely. Because if it wasn't for them representing what came before, there wouldn't have been anything that was there on stage beside them.
Exactly.
Oh, I wonder, who wrote the book of love? Tell me, oh, who wrote the book of love? I've got to know the answer. Was it someone from above? Oh, I wonder, who wrote the book of love?
I remember, by the way, just as another aside, Jay and the Americans were like the token white group on the first integrated tour of the South. And
Wow.
we went in the bus with Little Richard, Sir Douglas Quintet from San Antonio, I think.
Yeah, Doug Sam. Yeah, Doug
Doug
Sam.
Sam, two other groups. And the Upsetters, which was Little Richard's band, was Jimi Hendrix.
Wow, that's unreal.
So just talking about your trip going to the South, we spoke with another film director who was talking about, like in the civil rights era of the early 60s, and how black artists were touring from the North going into the South, obviously how difficult it was for them. So when you were touring the South as you call it, the token white act, what were your observations at the time of, if you'd pull up to a hotel or when you were checking into a venue to perform, were you being treated any better than Little Richard and the like?
Well, I remember when we would travel down south, we would drive all the way from Brooklyn, and we'd get out of the car in Raleigh, North Carolina. You could drive in those days. No one had to go to the bathroom every half hour. You could stick in the car for 12 hours and we'd get out of the car and we'd be in North Carolina. And during the day, you would see guys on the side of the road chained together with these white and black and a black and white hat. They were a chain gang. The Sam Cooke song, that's the sound of the men working on the chain gang. We would go into a truck stop to eat. In 1 second, it would be, the whole vibe would change because we were from another world. And this is just when Jay and the Americans would go down there to play with Roy Orbison, say, in Birmingham, Alabama or Montgomery, Alabama. They were closed up because there wasn't the TV, really. There wasn't the internet. You couldn't talk to people in Australia. It wasn't that. It just, so you came from Brooklyn, you didn't mean any harm. You didn't even know where you were. And they froze. And I remember one time with the integrated tour, we stopped, I never forgot, in Lynchburg, Virginia. and we all got out of the bus to go eat in a luncheonette. And by the time we came out, I can't remember if they wouldn't serve some of the people, because even though it was a political decree that had been passed, maybe in these areas they didn't care about that. They weren't going to serve you anyway. We remember when we came out, like half of the town was outside the diner. They had to call the highway patrol, to get us back on the bus. It was just the way it was. I think they felt threatened is really what it was. Their way of life was somehow being threatened.
Kenny, there was an amazing story from James Fort and Pookie Hudson, and the Spaniels when they had their big hit Goodnight Sweetheart. And they were touring the South for Vivian Carter and James Bracken's VJ label, and they ran out of money. They got arrested for vagrancy and couldn't get out of jail till Vivian Carter sent more money down. And they were top of the charts right across America.
Yeah. I mean, I also have Pookie in the film, that didn't make the final cut. And he's, just a really unbelievable special guy. I have footage of them with the original Spaniels. Peter might know the names of the original guys.
Gerald Bounce Gregory, the bass singer.
Oh, Gerald Gregory, of course. And they're singing Peace of Mind. I have a few takes of them singing Peace of Mind, and I have a few takes of them singing Good Night, Sweetheart.
Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. I hate to leave you, but I really must say, oh, good night, sweetheart. Good night.
We didn't use it in the film. I guess maybe over the years, I'll start to release some of this stuff on the Heart and Soul website. I guess in my mind, like Maurice was saying, it really deserves another deep dive, but it's prohibitive in terms of money. It's prohibitive unless a real radio station steps up to the plate and says, okay, we see what you did. We love it. And we want to continue the legacy of this.
I was going to say, to play an opposite to what you were talking about with your experience down south, the footage in your film of kids in the audiences, black and white, together, just losing their shit. And, and the music just pulled them together and said,
exactly.
We're not here to segregate. We're here to celebrate. Did they actually have, in your experience in the North, in New York and, in other cities, what they used to call kind of like the crow's nest, where they basically made a lot of black people sit up in the top or sit up in a balcony or whatever, or was it just a general free-for-all of kids just coming together and saying, to hell with your attitudes and all of that, we're here for a good time?
When we started to go to the Alan Freed show, with the groups that I mentioned, Buddy Holly and Chuck Berry and Fats Domino, Little Richard, the audience was mixed. And exactly what you said, they came there to have a good time, because everybody was united because they loved the music. But this also was threatening to adults. There was a scene in Baltimore. There was it was like a Dick Clark guy in Philly, but this guy was in Baltimore called Buddy Dean. And John Waters, I actually worked on Hairspray, which shines a light on this very subject that Tim is talking about. And so, there are people chronicling this, but, like you said before, the majority of the population kind of turns a blind eye to it.
I wanted to ask you about a couple of moments in the film that I absolutely loved. There's one point where you're introducing Arlene Smith of the Chantels, and I got to say, their song Maybe is just absolutely incredible. But you speak with her in a classroom in what looks like a primary school or elementary school. I think you call it up there in North America. And these kids, they're hanging off her every word. And it just seems so weird that I'm not sure if you filmed that like in the late 1990s or in the early 2000s or something like that. But still, at that point in time where kids through the radio are hearing music that is a million miles away from that sort of music, yet they're hanging off her every word with love and respect as to what her stories were all about. I just want to know, how did that segment come to be that she was coming? Is that something that she did, that she would go around to schools to talk music history, talk her history?
Become a school teacher.
Oh, okay.
It was over for her. So she became a school teacher, but she was very gratified from doing it. And I think I just went there that day. I didn't know what was going to be. And I called her, I said, well, we're going to talk to Arlene now. And she says, I'm Miss Smith here. And I said, yes, you are. And then I called her Miss Smith. And I said, Miss Smith wrote a few songs when she was 13 years old. To this day, when I hear Maybe in the film, when I go to a screening, I still get the chills from it. The first time I heard the song on the radio when I was a kid, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her performance on that, according to people like Phoebe Snow and they said Arlene Smith was the greatest one of us that ever was. It was Arlene Smith. That scene in the recording in the school class, in the class, you could see that they had a love for her and that she probably never talked about this. But the fact that I was there and I had a guitar, they were like glued to it. And everything that she said that was brand new to their ears, you could feel the love in that room. And then we give each other a kiss at the end. It's just beautiful, really beautiful.
I mean, that's a real indication that people shouldn't have to pay attention to what others say, what they should listen to, what they shouldn't listen to. And if you're free of any of that and you just listen to something free of any biases and you just hear it and you let your soul speak to it. And these young kids in late 1990s, early 2000s, free of being told what is popular and current, they just listen to this and they hear this. Wow, that's terrific. That speaks to me.
I knew this guy. He's 70. He was a crazy doo-wop guy. And he had a kid kind of late on. I don't know, maybe when he was 40 or something like that. So the kid is 8 years old and he's in the car with a bunch of his friends. So all he does is start playing Louis Lyman records. And the kids are going crazy. They don't know that they're not supposed to like it. They never heard it before, and they love it. And I think to myself, if this was on the radio, people would just love it. But of course, that doesn't exist.
Well, I think part of it is, if you look at it, we're inundated in a sea of information now with the internet and with mass media today, where, there's so much out there, you really can't pinpoint one thing. Whereas when you really think about back in the day, where you only had maybe 3 channels on television, there was so many AM, FM channels on the radio. But now it's like, if you just pick a thread and you really focus now, like Maurice was saying, and you pay attention, you will be rewarded tenfold with so much treasure from the past that people don't even.
I think, the Smithsonian and Institute and other museums all over the country are embracing it, is that academic institutions appreciate what this is. They understand that it was a moment in time, and it's an important moment in time because a lot of things were born out of this. Whereas, I guess HBO and Netflix or whatever, it's about, can we make money with this thing?
I'm not wanting to decry the importance of academia in preserving this stuff. It's obviously very, very important. But one thing that I've been such a big fan of Peter here is because, like, for the last 30 years or so, he'd been presenting his show, The Malt Shop Hop, on our local radio station, PBS. And that show every week was not about, here's something that's academic or here's something from the past. It's just, here's 2 hours of some really, really great songs. And if I'd been playing those songs on a Saturday night, if I was to have a party here and I was to put those songs on, people would enjoy them for what they were rather than as just a piece of history, as important as that is. But these are just great songs that people will slow dance to. I mean, those songs, some of those songs, I love the idea of doing a slow dance with my wife to really, I mean, Peter knows my favorite doo-wop song of all time is I Only Have Eyes for You by the Flamingos.
Are the stars out tonight? I don't know if it's cloudy or bright. I only have eyes for you.
And of course, I know a song that Peter has long pushed on the other end of the scale is 60 Minute Man.
60-minute man.
Look here, girls, I'm telling you now, they call me love and dad. I'll rock 'em, roll 'em all night long. I'm a 60-minute man.
Do you know the follow-up to that? The 60-minute man?
I don't think I do.
Peter?
Chicken Blues.
The follow-up to 60-minute man was Can't Do 60 No More.
No more. Well, yeah. Interesting, though, Kenny. The Dewdroppers had that song first.
Yeah,
and then
right.
the Dominoes did their version, but it was different words. But yeah,
That's right.
Can't Do
That's
60
right.
No More.
But I have to tell you a good story. I hope I told a few, but one is that on I Only Have Eyes for You, the Flamingos recorded that song at 224 West 57th Street in Manhattan at Regent Sound Studios. The engineer was Bob Lifton. The producer was George Goldner. And the Flamingos went in. George Goldner had an idea to do standards. I Only Have Eyes for You is like from Bugsby Berkeley musicals from, I guess, the 30s or 40s. And so they had this arrangement, and they only had 4 tracks on the machine. So there was these 4 pots, 4 big pots. That was it. There was no EQ or any of that stuff. Maybe you could add a little echo or you could add a little reverb. So he took the background vocals, because in those days you could mic the room and you could have all kinds of different microphones. So he mic'd the background vocals and he took the microphone and he went out into the hallway and he put it down the elevator shaft.
Yeah.
And that's where you hear that echo from the microphone being in the echo shaft. So the next time you hear I Only Have Eyes for You and you hear that background, that's...
You see, for years, we were always hearing stories about, I think it's either The Boxer or Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that
the drum.
So Hal Blaine's drum was recorded in an elevator shaft. And we always sort of like talk, oh, this is novel, this is unique. And now here you're putting paid to that lie, saying, no, guys, this is done 10 years or more before that. I love that story. And actually, so a question in relation to that song, because like I think towards the end of your film where you're showing acts performing, was it the Vocal Hall of Fame Awards or something?
Yeah,
like
we were at we were there, and we used it because it's so great. We wanted to use it, and we used it. I think right before I sing in the parking lot with the teenagers. Yeah.
So there's a moment where you're showing, like at the back of the curtain, these signs of all the different acts who are going to be performing on the night. And you had the Flamingos there. And I'm thinking, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I adored your film and I will probably watch it another 15 times like Peter will. But I was thinking, why were the Flamingos not included to speak with them? Were they not available to talk with you?
No. Denny Doherty was there. He was with
Mamas and Papas, yeah.
He was with the Mamas, and the two of them were there. Michelle Phillips and Denny Doherty. What's his name? From the Flamingos. He wrote Mi Amore.
Nate Nelson.
No, not Nate Nelson. Terry Johnson. On the Flamingo Serenade album, he's, I think, on the left-hand side with holding a guitar.
Mm.
They're all gone. As a matter of fact, Tommy Hunt just passed away like about a few months ago.
Yeah.
He was the last one. But Terry Johnson is still alive. And he goes out with a flamingo group, but probably not so much anymore. But he was he was there, and I'm with them. I probably have an interview with him, but at some point you just have to figure out what's going to be in the film. And
sure.
Cleveland still, I love the scene where he's in the audience and I bring him up in the film and I said, Cleveland, show us how to do it. And he starts, doing it like the dance that we saw him do at the Brooklyn Paramount. And then it's just a beautiful moment. Cleveland is a beautiful guy.
See, the other thing that I really loved in the film was seeing so much footage with Little Anthony and the Imperials. I knew some of the music, and I think my first introduction to the name was through that Tom Waits song, Christmas Card from a Hooker in Minneapolis. That was, who's he talking about? But there was that scene there where I can't remember what they were singing, what the performance was, but the dancing, my Lord, it's not just about the singing, it's about giving the show, making the show. And did James Brown steal from them, or was it just a common thing that acts would go out and make a big show like Little Anthony and the Imperials did in that film clip?
It wasn't so common. The Flamingos had a dance routine like that. It's on YouTube. I'll share it with you. I can't think of it now, but at some other time we can communicate, and I'll send you that. And Little Anthony and the Imperials had it. As a matter of fact, that song, Little Anthony had most of the song, and I think he said to George Golden, I need to finish the song, and he was playing at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, and George Golden sent over Sam Cooke to finish the song with him. So that song called I'm All Right was written by Little Anthony, Gordine, and Sam Cooke.
Well, I'm all right. All right. All right. I'm all right. Yes, I'm all right. Since my baby told me she loved me, I'm all right. I'm all right. Since she told me she put no one above me.
Kenny, the film clip you're thinking of is their wonderful version of Jump Children of Flamingos.
Killer.
It is a staggering piece of music, and the dance routine is unbelievable.
When people would say, what was the 50s like? You play Jump Children.
I was just thinking about something for a minute. When you were talking about Eddie and the Cruisers and going back to your work in film, the film Streets of Fire, there was a guy, Dan Hartman, where he did a song, I Can Dream About You.
Sure.
And it's almost like a rollback to what you're talking about, because there's a scene in that movie where him and the whole band, and it's not him on stage, I don't think, but they're doing the whole harmonizing and everything with the dance moves and all.
So I produced that record.
Wow, no kidding.
The guy that's on stage is the guy that's singing the lead, was singing the lead. And he was a guy that worked at a Radio Shack, because I wrote the song Countdown to Love that's in the movie.
Right.
That those guys sing in the bus.
Wow.
Ba, 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 ooh, ooh, ba, 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 ooh. Remember when you didn't love me? Now all the time you're...
When Dan Hartman heard the guy that did I Can Dream About You, I can't even remember his name now, but when Dan Hartman heard it, he took the guy's vocal off and he put his own on. And so he had the hit record with it.
Oh, no.
But the guy that sings it, I don't know if in the movie it's the guy that I made the record with or Dan Hartman. I don't know. I don't remember.
Right. I think it was Dan Hartman.
I see. That's that story. The guy was getting ready to leave Radio Shack, but...
Oh, man.
Yeah, show business. It's a tough gig.
But you're still here and telling the stories. Thank goodness for that, Kenny.
Thank you.
Insofar as the release of the film now, I know that you're doing individual screenings with audience Q&As and the like, and it's shown on your American PBS network. What's the long-term future for this, besides, getting it into the Smithsonian, which is absolutely fantastic. But for people who are listening to this who are thinking this is a fascinating conversation, I would love to see that film. How could most people get to see it nowadays? Or are they just going to have to catch as catch can?
Well, I hope that they'll go to the website, which I mentioned before, which was heartandsoulthemovie.com, all one word spelled out. And this way they can see things from the movie. And we have hired an agent that represents us in trying to get us a distributor. So that might happen. And of course, we can stay in touch and I'll let you know if that happens.
Please.
And meanwhile, even though I think a lot of people would like to shut it down, it seems to keep going. It has a life of its own. And hopefully, with the Smithsonian publicity and with other museums that are embracing the movie right now, hopefully, it'll keep going and more people will see it and appreciate, that particular time in American history that is unfortunately becoming lost as time goes by, that people don't even know. Because soon after that period, 5 years, then all of a sudden they had Fabian and Frankie Avalon and Bobby Rydell, and it just changed into something else. But thank God Motown came around, and thank God the Philadelphia sound came around, because it brought back that rhythm and blues, beautiful, beautiful soul music. And then as time went by, slowly it went away, and Funkadelic, and who were the Wilson brothers? What was the name of that group? They also had that kind of infectious rhythm and blues stuff. And then recently, I think Julio Iglesias' son had a hit with it. Oh, no, Bruno Mars had a hit with it. But it's derivative of the Gap Band. The Gap Band, yeah.
I was going to say, like, you even see and maybe I'm stretching it a bit thin, but like, I come from the punk era, and I mean, even you see bands like the Ramones, and the Ramones, to me, were almost like an extension of going back, not necessarily going forward. When you listen to even the songs that they were singing, like that, whoa, 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 like all that, it's all there. I mean, it's totally all there. Yeah.
No, that's for sure. Those guys grew up in the streets of Queens, and they knew what doo-wop was.
Right,
absolutely.
right. And when you were talking about Rockaway, it's like Rockaway Beach. So like, absolutely, 100%.
Rockaway.
Yep.
Not my a cappella group, but my last power pop trio I was playing drums for. But we did one song by the Ramones, which was Bonzo Goes to Bitburg, My Brain is Hanging Upside Down. And I didn't have to muck around with it. It was a doo-wop song hiding in a pop group. But yeah, so Joey Ramone was a huge fan of that early 60s sound.
Well, he actually recorded with Ronnie Spector.
He did, yes.
So, it's all there, man, and I mean, like, as much as we've been sitting here bemoaning, saying that a lot of people are listening today, it's like almost like a virus doo-wop where it's kind of seeped into so many elements today, subversively, that people don't even realize, and it's so funny about that. They're like, wait a minute, you mean this song was already written? It's like, well, go back, get in your YouTube machine and go down a rabbit hole, and next thing you know, like,
You hear it all the time in the commercials. I just heard Rubber Biscuits in a like a barbecue commercial. People don't know. They don't know, but it's in the consciousness of America.
Even down here, I think for this series of ads for, I think for the lottery, they've been using Shaboom for years, haven't they, Peter?
Oh, by the chords.
Right, the chords, yeah.
Kenny, can I ask you an out there question? Did you have much to do with Frank Zappa in the 60s, who was a massive doo-wop, Reuben and the Jets?
Oh, I just loved it. There was a guy, whoever his falsetto singer was, the guy was a killer. And I love that album. The only thing I knew about them was Cruising and Reuben and the Jets, but I worked with Donald Fagen and Walter Becker, for many years on records, and so they were huge fans of them. So I understood who they were through them. But that's a whole other story.
But I also believe you worked with a very close friend of mine, unfortunately, who's passed, was Jerry Lawson and the Persuasions.
Joel Dorn was a surrealist, and he would produce people like Kate Smith. He would produce people, Peter Allen and Don McLean, a tremendous variety of different people. And the Persuasions were one of the colors that he would use on his records. And he would always bring the Persuasions in to appear on a cut on one of those people's records. I think, for example, on Don McLean's Homeless Brother album,
yeah,
I think he does Crying in the Chapel, and he's got the Persuasions singing background. Anytime he would use the Persuasions on something, he would call me up to just sort of come up there and listen to it and make sure everything was the way he wanted it to be. But I think I'm starting to fade a little bit, guys. But it's so great, and I appreciate you guys so much for keeping it alive and loving the movie. It's just very gratifying. So thank you for that.
No, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
But it's really been beautiful. Thank you so much.
Our absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, Kenny, and thank you for the music that you've given us over all these years. Just thank you so much for putting this documentary together. It's been a huge honor and a privilege to speak to you. Thank you so much.
Kenny, I'd like to say, as a lifelong doo-wopper, from my heart to your heart, thank you.
Okay, Tim, you guys are all great. Really, I really appreciate you. All the best.
All the best.
All the best.
Cheers, Kenny.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care, Kenny.
Thanks a lot.
Yep. Cheers.
Bye.
Be well.
You too.
Come on and look at me. You've got me loving you madly. That little kiss you stole. You stole. Yes, you stole. You stole. You stole. You stole. Yes, you stole. All my heart. And soul. Yes, you stole. All my heart. And soul. Yes, you stole. You stole.
Thanks very much again to Kenny Vance. And I should also give a big shout out to Liz Nichols, who I think was one of the producers on the film. She was the lady who very kindly made the connection between us and Kenny. So huge thanks to you, Liz.
Thank you, Liz.
A big, big thank you, Liz.
Once again, a huge thanks to you too, Peter.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you, Peter, so much.
Thank you, Tim.
You even stumped the band. There was times where Kenny was just like, wow, yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Whoa, man. You got him a couple times, man. That was amazing.
We'd love to have you back on the show, Peter. I've got to sort of suss out what are your other listening interests outside of doo-wop, because there aren't that many doo-wop films I can think of. But
unfortunately, no.
I'll have a chat with you offline and work out what else that is of interest that we could possibly bring you back for, because absolutely it was great. Next month will be a round table discussion. And I've gone and picked a film for next month, which I know will be of huge interest to you, Tim. I'm pretty sure that this is one that you would have wanted to have covered anyway. So it's a 2008 documentary. I haven't watched it yet, but it came in my YouTube feed, I think the other day, and I thought, yep, got to do this. So it's a 2008 film, a documentary about Lee Scratch Perry. The documentary is called The Upsetter.
The Upsetter. Yeah.
I know that you would have picked this if I hadn't done this first. So.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
That will be for episode 126 coming out next month. All the usual things. If you want to speak with us, send us an email at seeherepodcast@gmail.com. Join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/See Here Podcast. Let your friends know that we exist. Our love to you. Be nice to your friends. Just be nice to people. And with that said, all the best. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye for now.
I was walking with a cane. Oh, I had